So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna start to put in our focal points of the tree and the giraffe. You can do them either way, if you want them facing a different way or if you want a different silhouette. I tend to lose things. I went ahead and Googled giraffe silhouettes. I went ahead and found this one. I feel like this will be a little bit easier to walk you guys through teaching wise, as opposed to just being like, all right, let's paint a giraffe. But I want to use, I'm going to paint the tree first and then we'll move into the giraffe just so we can kind of get the spacing right. When I painted it yesterday, I kind of got a little overzealous and my giraffe was huge and my tree was tiny and it just looked really goofy. So with my 1/4 inch brush, it's the second smallest brush that you have. This one. I'm going to dampen it so that I have, again, that cool temperature, but I'm not squeezing too many extra water out. And I'm going to go ahead and make a very dark brown by pulling some of that sepia and that black together. Only because I want it to be somewhere in between this color. I don't want it to be too dark or else it's going to really stand out. Or if it's too light, then it won't really make very much sense. But I'm going to go ahead and probably a little bit closer to this area below my horn. And I'm just going to put a little line. And that's going to be where my tree trunk falls or grows out of the ground. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of, I like to paint more of the paddle so that way I get that whole width of the brush stroke. And as I work my way up, I just kind of squiggle it in my hand a little bit, so it's a little bit curvier and a little bit more organic and it's not just a perfect matchstick. And from here, I'm just going to go ahead and come up. I'm going to break my horizon line. And as I get up to that point, I'm going to slowly take my brush and kind of twist it in my hand so it becomes more of a razor blade as opposed to the paddle, right? And then you can see by doing so, it'll taper out. And I'm just going to kind of come off to the side and work my way over. Now, it's not too pretty right yet. Right, it's just kind of like a little wonky line, but we'll get there. And since we are painting, and from here, since we are painting these types of trees, our trees in they're African in the savanna tend to be a little bit more horizontal. They grow up and they just kind of flatten out. So again, I'm just going to go over this line one more time with my dark brown, just mixing the two together. Okay. Starting down on that paddle, and I'm just going to come up and squiggle it a little bit. I'm not moving too fast because I really want that nice crisp line like we had up here for a horizon. And that way I don't have any of those fuzzies floating around my tree. And as I get up, I'm just going to slowly rotate that brush in my fingers so that it comes up to a point. From here, I'll start building out my branches. And I want to make sure, again, I keep them very squat. A lot of the times when I see people paint trees like this, they tend to get really tall and more kind of like a hand with the leaves on the top. But I want this to be pretty flat. And so same thing, I'm going to take, I like to push and pull, getting a nice crisp edge on my brush. And then from here, I'm going to take a little part off this side and I'm going to come out. And again, I want to keep it pretty horizontal. I'm almost painting just like a really flat squat Y. And I can see right here it's a little bit thicker than it is up at the top. So that's where I'll just pull that out and make another tree branch. And from here, I'm just going to slowly kind of do that here and there. Until it starts to go from a Y to maybe a T. We'll thicken that up. Again, mostly on the horizontal. I don't want too many vertical branches or it's going to look like a species that's kind of out of place. And like I said earlier, I like to paint for science, and so that's another reason why I'm teaching us how to do this type of tree as opposed to like maybe a maple or a pear, which probably wouldn't grow in the African savanna anyway. But as I start to build into these branches, does anybody have any questions about how we got the base of this tree started? No? Okay. And again, as I work, before we move into the smaller brush to paint in some of the twiggies, this is where I really like to make sure, again, you push and pull, flip, push and pull, and you'll get that nice, really crisp razor blade edge. You can almost see how sharp my brush looks. And that's gonna help me get a lot of those tiny little branches. And I'm just gonna slide over here real fast so I can start throwing in some more. We don't need to paint too many, we just really want to chunk out the nice shape of the tree. And once I get this all filled in, I'll bring it closer up to the camera so you guys can see how it actually looks. A lot of the times I find that when we're painting, we're so close to it that all we see are the imperfections. And when you step away, it changes it. So if you're kind of feeling that about your tree, just kind of scoot back and look at it and see how you feel. And then kind of, reapproach with a different mindset, just making sure, you're not just digging yourself into a hole with something that you don't like, when in reality it probably looks really good. And it's just you looking at it and thinking about it a little too much. But you can see, they're just a little wonky here and there, and I'll slowly start to build a couple more in just so I can get a nicer shape. But again, I want to make sure that I keep it very horizontal. The branches are very squat, and the trunk is very long, more like a T or a really low Y. Are we all still doing okay? Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and maybe throw in another little branch up here. Really start to fill in some of these. But again, I don't want to get too out of control with it. I want to make sure I'm keeping it really in that inch or two plane. And if you're not feeling very comfortable using this brush on the razor blade edge, again, you can always switch to the round brush. It'll keep it a nicer point, right? Really teeny tiny, and you can come in here and throw in super tiny little twigs. That's what you want. I know these brushes are all brand new, so you guys got a good pick of the litter when it comes to that. Sometimes in studio it's hard to find a brush that's small that can get all of those in there. Again, you can see, keeping it on the horizontal, nice African tree. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this brush, the 1/4 inch that I've been using, and I'm just going to give it a good scrub in the bottom of my cup. As I clean that off, I'm just going to go ahead and dry that brush out as best as I can. It's really important for this next step that this brush is as dry as possible. If there's too much moisture in it, you won't get the textures that we're looking for. And so I've just dried it off on my paper towel or my cloth, and I'm just making sure that all of that extra water or paint is out of it. And as you guys all catch up, I'll just go ahead and bring this a little bit closer so you can see the tree. Now what I'm going to want to do is we're going to paint the leaves again on a horizontal, but we only want to do them around the edges and the twigs. We do not want to paint leaves down the branch of the trunk. Okay, that'll look again like a different species, and so we're really just gonna fill in the edges, creating that nice silhouette. And so you can see, even with this example, it does break the picture frame of Africa and that the continent. It breaks it. That's okay if yours does as well. Again, this is your painting, and you guys can make your tree however you want. But you'll see again, all of the leaves are kind of around the edges, and that way your branches and your trunk are still visible. Okay. Now to get this texture with this dry brush, I want to go ahead, I'm just going to use my hand, but I just want to take it and tap it out, really putting a lot of pressure onto that brush. I know, it's kind of fun. So you get a nice poofy bristle. It's 100% opposite of what we were originally going for with that nice crisp razor blade. This time we want as much texture as possible, and keeping it dry will really help with that. Okay, you can see it just kind of, right? Now, I beat it up here. I want to give it a little bit of love here. And so ever so delicately, I'm not even going to bend the bristles, but I'm just going to slowly tap them out and roll them around into this paint. So that way I get, you can see, it's just the coverage on the tips, barely, and none really on the side of it. And that is what's going to allow us to start to create our leaves. Right? So the less pressure you put down, the more texture you will have. The harder you push on your canvas, the more of like a blob you're gonna get. And so keeping that really nice, delicate texture with those frayed bristles is what's gonna create your tree. And I'm working my way on the horizontal around my bristles, or around my branches and my twigs. And I keep coming back ever so lightly, barely just tippy tap, in between my brown and my black. Again, tippy tap, delicate, hardly any pressure. And I'm just gonna slowly fill those in. And that will start to create our tree silhouette. Well, hello! So you can see those bristles, a really nice texture, right? And that's what we're going for. And again, I've kept it on the edges of the branches and not filling it in. I really want to see a lot of that space. You get a good example of it again. This one too. They just have more paint here, and they pushed a little bit harder so they're not getting as much texture, a little bit darker. You can go for either of these, right? Where you have more of those pokies showing through, or a fuller tree. It's up to you guys. Again, it's your painting, your landscape. Paint it how you want. If you need to, you can always come in, because I can see that this is a little bit dark in contrast. You can always come back in with that same brush, that same technique. I still haven't even rinsed mine off because I really love the texture that it's getting, but I'm just gonna come in here with only that sepia, right? And maybe I just throw a couple more browns just around the edges, so that way you're getting some more dimension into it, even though it's just a silhouette. And so it's not a lot, not a big movement, but it's just really subtle. It's really there, right? And then maybe I finally take that brush and I give it a scrub in the bottom of my cup just to clean it off and bring those bristles back into play. And that way my brush isn't just kind of mad at me and frazzled for the rest of its life. Because I will use that. Maybe we throw in a little bit of a shadow here, or maybe we take some of that brown and maybe just kind of how we did here, but maybe we just put like a little line off to the side just to give that some more depth and shape. And then I'm just going to meet in the middle with these two. Take that brush. And if my light source is kind of over here, maybe this just kind of trickles off to the side, and that's how we'll start to paint a shadow. It's a little dark, so I'm just going to lighten it up a tiny bit. I don't want to go too far. But now you can see my tree sets into space, right? Are we all feeling okay about our trees? Hopefully. I know sometimes they tend to be a little bit tricky, but hopefully they're all looking pretty good. All right. If we're all caught up there, we'll slowly start to move into our giraffe, which might be a little bit more difficult, but I'm gonna try and break it down into some simple shapes for us, and that way it'll be a little bit easier to paint, and it won't just be a giraffe. You're gonna think about it in the head, the neck, the body, and then we'll paint the legs in. But what we want to do is make sure that we keep it in proportion to our tree. Like I had said earlier, when I started to paint mine yesterday, my giraffe was here, and its legs are down here, and I was like, oh wait, that doesn't make any sense. So what I am gonna do, my tiny little round brush, right? I lost my palette, you guys. Where are my paints? Okay. What I am going to do is kind of make a general tick for it. If you need to use your pencil and draw it out first, feel free, please do. I'm just going to kind of go gung-ho in, but if you need to draw it out, just make sure that you come from the base of your tree and you put a little bit of a line here, so you know where it should stand. That way it's not going to be floating or too far in front of it. But for all intents and purposes, I will just put 4 tiny little dots as to where my hooves will meet. I'm sorry? All right, are we all ready for this? Cool. So again, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull this up. If you want a different silhouette, you can find one on Google. They're so easy. Giraffe silhouettes, and you'll just find a multitude of them. But what I'm going to do is start. Again, I've got the little dots for my feet, and what I want to do is kind of break it down into the shapes. So the head of the giraffe, and what I will actually do. Give me 1 second. I'll walk you guys through this before I go ahead and start painting it, so that way we're on the same page. We're going to want to start by building it with, again, our basic shapes. And so I found that the head of the giraffe is almost like a pear. I'm all over the place. I'm missing my brush. Sorry, you guys. I'm looking for my 1/4 inch brush. It's the tiny little rectangle one. I'll just use a different one for now. This one, it's either going to be that or your tiny. Oh, perfect. It was in a Sprite. You can use either of these two brushes. It'll probably give you a good shape. This one will be a little bit tighter. You might have to come back into the paint a few more times just to get enough necessary, but this one will give you a little bit more of a decent coverage. I'm gonna go ahead and show you here, and then I'll paint it on mine. If you need to practice on some paper or something in front of you, again, feel free. But the head of your giraffe is going to be almost like a sideways pear, right? Okay. We're gonna give it just a little bit of a nubbin on this side for its eyelid. Okay. And then we'll take that same brush right up here. We're just gonna paint a horn, right? And then directly below that, on the base of our pear, we're gonna paint a teardrop with the point facing out, and that's gonna be your ear. So you can already see, here's the snout of the giraffe, here's its chin, its eye, its horn, and its ear, right? From here, we'll end up building in its neck, attaching it here at the base, giving it a slight curve. It doesn't need to be too dramatic, but we just want it, again, to look a little bit more natural and not just a perfect stick straight neck. As we go, it's going to thicken up a little bit at the bottom so you have a smooth taper. Okay. And then off to this side of it, we're going to give it a little bit of a hump. And that's just where it's going, the spine of the giraffe is actually going to connect to the shoulder blades. And then its chest will kind of be down here, following the rib cage. So once you have the head of your giraffe on, again, depending on where you've put your tree, this could be a little bit smaller, it could be a little bit larger. What I'm going to do is take that, and then I'm just going to paint an oval, or an egg shape almost, where I want this chest of the giraffe to be a little bit bigger than, say, where its rump. We'll just fill that whole thing into the silhouette. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was going to be in the way, but hopefully everybody can still see it. Right, so now you have the body of your giraffe, and the last thing we'll have to do is paint on the legs and the tail, and that's just going to be a couple lines. We want to make sure that we keep its joints and make it look, again, as realistic as we have the rest of our painting, and so we don't want to rush this part, even though it's the very end. Give the painting the same amount of love all the way through, but it's just going to be one line, and then it'll have a knee, and then you'll bring that down, right, into the hoof. Okay, maybe this one comes off to the side, back behind it. It's the left. The same thing. Bring it down. Making sure that we keep its joints in place. The picture that I'm looking from, that giraffe has a little bit of a tummy, so I'll just go ahead and drop that down a little bit further, and then build in its hind legs. And again, knee. This comes off to the side. The thing with silhouettes is that you really want to kind of break a lot of the shapes up and try to get some of that space in between the legs. That's going to make it look more natural and not just like a giraffe that's walking on two legs. Really giving it some character for just like that flat black shape. And then at the end, I'll pull off this tail and just bring it down with maybe a little teardrop at the bottom of it. Now I can see, sorry, I was looking at it a little different. This has tiny, tiny legs. You'll probably want to bring them down a little bit further, again, just so we can have the proportions of our giraffe a little bit more accurate. I think the angle that I was looking at is a little off, but you can see how that will start to look. And again, if you've practiced it, great. If not, then what we're going to want to do is just go ahead and start painting it on. And so again, I'll walk you through that one more time while I do it on my painting, as opposed to the back of that canvas, which is a little bit harder to work on. But I feel like, you know, a little test run before we go all the way in, making sure that we don't just sabotage our painting at the very end. Can't tell you how many times I've done that. But if that's the case and you do mess up, you can always wait for it to dry, and then you'll just mix these paints and you'll paint right back over it, and that will give you a couple more opportunities to try to nail that giraffe really into place and get it solid. All right, one more time. This time, since I'm painting it smaller, I'm going to use my tiny little round brush. It's damp but not dripping, and I'm going to paint smaller than what I feel like I should. Keeping it honed in, you can always add more paint, but it's going to be a little bit harder to shrink that giraffe down if we start getting it too large. And so again, I'm just going to come in here. I know that my legs are here, my body, and then my head will be around right here. So again, I've got my giraffe right here. If you guys can see that, hopefully I won't get too much in the way. Probably do this. This will probably be a little bit easier. Come in. Right up here. And your pear shape for the head. Barely graze in. Right? You can be a little bit higher or lower, but we want it to just barely be touching the trees. You know, a little nipping, having a little quarantine snack. It's not too hungry, I don't think. Put that. Eyebrow. The horn. Right? And then I'm just going to come in and paint that ear. As you can see, it's just a floating pear. Okay. Now, if you need to skip around and if you want to go ahead and kind of paint your legs in or paint your body in so that you know where it's going to be at, you can. I just kind of like to work this way so I can build the giraffe anatomically. Set that down. Pull my reference photo back out. The one thing that I was taught in art is you want to look more at what you're painting and less at what you're painting, and that way you can make sure you know you're really getting it the way that it's supposed to be. And so it's another reason why I try to always keep my references right here with me, no matter what I'm painting. And I'm just going to, again, come in and slowly build in its neck. Throw on its shoulder blade. Right? And then we'll build in the body. Little hump right there. Back and down. Little scrawny neck. Might thicken that up a little bit. It's starting to look like me. Okay. And I'm just gonna give it its belly. We'll build in the legs from there. And so I'm just going to fill this whole thing in. front of you guys just so I can get a better angle on this. Pardon me for this one. Let's do it this way. Am I any good? Okay. Maybe need to end or something. Maybe it's tiny. I drop a little too far down, but it'll be okay. We'll fix it. Hoof, ankle, knee. And then we'll move into the back legs. Pop back over here for it. And giving it a little belly. Bring that back up. Chonk. Okay. Hoof. Ankle. And this is just going to come back out for its other leg. Give it a little shape. Really fill in that last haunch. And then just take, again, a little bit of patience and a little bit of love. And that's really going to help make sure that this has nice, crisp, clean lines around the outside of it. Find the pin in its tail. We're just going to slide back. Oh, yeah. And I can see my giraffe has really tiny legs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring these down a little bit further. Try to make them look as natural as possible, even though I've already kind of. But again, I'll come through and I'll throw a little bit of an extra paint around some of these sides just to really help build that in. I probably should have measured a little bit better first before I just went all in. But it's the glory of painting. Again, like I said, you can always repaint over it if it's not really how you're feeling. I'm just going to keep going back and forth and trying to play with this until I get a really delightful silhouette that I like. The giraffes are such a goofy looking animal anyway, so I think we'll be okay if it's not perfect. But this is where I'm at right now. You can see that leg probably needs a cast. He got attacked by a lion. What I'm going to do is, just like I did with my tree and I threw in a couple of tiny little highlights, I'm going to move in, same brush. I'm just going to dip it into the sepia. Just going to dip that into the sepia just to get a little bit of paint on it. And I'm going to slowly give him some tiny highlights, maybe right here in the back. Again, it's not big, it's not a really powerful brush stroke. It's just really subtle, and that way you're getting that nice atmosphere. That brown's almost blending in with that wet black paint, so you'll start to see the brush strokes, and that will give you, again, some shape. Maybe I throw in one on this side so you can tell that, one of these legs is in front of the other. Subtle, super subtle. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry, you guys. That leg is a little weird. But then the same thing like I did with this tree. I'm going to mix a color that's kind of in the middle. And maybe that leg's kind of lifted, and that's why it looks like that. And so maybe I'll just start here and just do, and maybe that doesn't even, these connect, and maybe that one doesn't. And I just slowly start to paint in a shadow. The closer it is to the animal, the harsher it will be. And then since it's so tall, you know, its neck might not even have a shadow, and that will just kind of fade off into your background. I guess I'm gonna go home and practice painting crabs. All right. So once you kind of get that the way that you like it, and let me grab this and bring it closer so you can see how subtle some of those little brown brush strokes are, right? It's not a lot. It's not a heavy movement. And then I've just got that shadow. And again, that leg's a little goofy, so don't look at it if you don't want. But the next thing that we're going to do, once you get your draft the way that you love it, we'll just throw in tiny little outlines around our cop mint just to solidify, unify, and make it look as if it's a polished piece. And that way you won't have any of these little flakies poking through. And then while I do that, does anybody have any questions? Are we all okay? Are we all caught up? Yeah? Wonderful. The painting back here behind me has a red outline. I think I'm going to go ahead and use my sienna just so that it helps kind of draw it all together and it's not too harsh. But I'm just going to throw in tiny little squiggles here and there. Maybe not even outlining the entire thing. Maybe I just want to throw in places where it really needs it. Right here. Really bring that landscape out. Same thing. And I'm just going to rest my pinky on my painting so that if parts of it are wet, I'm not getting it all over my hand or I'm not smudging it. And I'm just going to use it as a balance. A lot of the times you'll see professional artists with like a really big rod that they just rest up here and they use that. I feel like that's just enough. Here and there, just sharpening up some spots so I don't have any of that really goofy looking paint come through. You can see just by adding that tiny bit of outline here and there, it's already just crisping it up. It's really making that painting stand forward, and it's making this part of your background just set back into space, almost as if it wasn't even painted to begin with, which is going to be really nice when you get the whole thing kind of polished off and finished. And again, people are going to be like, "Where did you buy that?" That was me, I did it. Come back over here and just do a little bit on this side, a little bit around the bottom. Give some Madagascar some love too. Let's forget about Madagascar. And then once you do that, you'll actually be finished. You can use any color you would like to sign it. You can sign it wherever you would want, be it on the background, maybe down in the south of Africa. You could put it on one of the spots of the giraffe. It's your painting, and I encourage you to be as creative with it as possible. Oh, yep. And And then as you guys finish up, I will give you a few more minutes just to do your thing, and then I'll be back with you in just a moment, okay?
Okay, so
That stops too.
No, but that's okay.
Okay.
I'm not worried about that. If you could ask if anybody has any questions, which I know you've done a million times, and then ask if there's anybody who would like to show their painting.
Yeah, and share.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
share, take themselves off mute, and
Yeah.
then share.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Okay.
great.
Cool. Give it a wait a few minutes before I do that, though.
It's up to you.
All right. If anybody's already started to finish or are finished, if you would like to share your painting, you guys can feel free to do so. Just take yourself off mute and pop it up so that we can all see how we've done. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. It's just one of those things where, since we're not in studio together, we don't get to share all of the creativity like we normally would. And I know Tawana's smiling real big because I think she's excited to see some of these too. If you have any questions, again, please feel free and ask. We want to make sure that we get everybody to a place where they're absolutely in love with their painting and they're so happy about it. I always get a little sad when somebody is not 100% with what they've done, and if there's any way that I could help you guys get your painting to that point from afar, please feel free, unmute yourselves, ask any questions, or share your painting that you're so very happy with. Of course, you're very, very welcome.
It's been amazing, and I can't wait to see the pieces that were done today. Prime time, I hope you enjoyed the activity today. The whole point is that art is so calming. I know some of us can be really competitive and want everything to be perfect. Zach, I really appreciate you walking us through the fact that all of these masterpieces are personal and our own, but it was so nice to spend a couple of hours getting out of our heads just a little bit and putting it all down on paint. We've all been locked up quite a bit and dealing with all sorts of things and stress as a result. And this afternoon has been very pleasant, and hopefully it has been for everyone else as well. I'd love to see all of your work. Wave a hand if you feel done. I see people still working. Do people still want to work on what they're doing?
Is that Hope Hampton?
Yes.
Hi, it's Tawana.
Hi, Tawana. I didn't know if you were there.
I am. We social distancing.
Of course. So Jackie Tawana Hill, who is the owner of Mimosa and a Masterpiece, is an incredible entrepreneur in our community.
Yeah,
A
pop
dear
over and say hi.
friend on top of that. But she's amazing, and Mimosa and a Masterpiece does great, great work, as you can see. If you get a chance, look at her.
Hi.
Want to
So-
join us with us remotely today?
Yes. So I just wanted to thank everybody because these are new and exciting times that we find ourselves in, and this was the first Zoom class that we did. So you probably heard doing a lot of walking and just chit-chatting with Zach because I just wanted to see how it all went. And so thank you all so much for, helping me kind of work through this and still continue to stay innovative no matter what season Mimosa and a Masterpiece is in. So thank you.
I know this was a first.
It was. Yes. This was the first time. So thank you all.
We'll all get out one day. We will know how to do this now, but when we get out, we'll be there. Because group, I want you all to know that not only is Ms. Tawana an entrepreneur, she also has worked corporately for more than 20 years here in Indianapolis. She's a motivational speaker, has authored 2 books. She is a life coach, and so it's just a perfect combo for us today. It's a nice sunny day.
It is.
So
It is.
I really love that it's Africa. I love the colors that were
Yes.
selected. And so hopefully everyone has had an enjoyable afternoon.
I hope so. And if you could tag me, Tawana Hill, or Mimosa and a Masterpiece on Instagram and Facebook. Leave a review on Yelp.
We will.
I would love y'all for that. Thank you, and have a great Sunday. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Hope, and thanks, Zach.
Yes, of course. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Hopefully I didn't go too fast, and again, hopefully you guys love absolutely everything that you've done. And hope while you finish up, if you guys have any questions for Tawana or myself, just holler and we'll answer it for you, okay? Happy Sunday, y'all. Thank you.
All